You see, something's going to happen.
What? What's going to happen?
Something wonderful.
What?
I understand how you feel. You see, it's all very clear to me now.
On a Thursday night, we got a party going on over here at the Occult Rejects. We got a bunch of people. We got the mad scientist herself, Lisa. We got my favorite garbage can dude, JJ Vance. We got my boy Thrash. We got the spiritual gangster herself, the Catholic/Gnostic Teresa. And we also got we got my boy Magic Mike. You know, we can't forget him. And we got the one and only Headless Giant with us. I'm not going to have all of them introduce themselves because there is way too many people here. If you want to get in touch with them or find their stuff, I'm sure their links are in the bottom. If not, I will add it after the fact. But tonight, we do have back Julia from Cosmic Peach Podcast. We're doing part 2 to Program to Kill. Just due to how it went last week, I'm taking this down probably after the live. So if you're catching it now, good for you. I may not be up too long after the fact. So we got a strike last week, so we don't want that to happen again. But Julia, thank you so much for coming back. We had a blast on the first episode. You know, we really had a good time and just a lot of stuff in a short amount of time. And just, you know, I'll be totally honest, just even on your own series, I think it's packed with information and packed with stuff. So you alone, you know, I thought was just great. But, you know, bringing it to the Occult Rejects, you know, it was awesome to have all of us get in on it. But yeah, for real.
Yeah, it was a great time, actually. I had a great time.
Hell yeah. Yeah, and for real, for people who, you know, may not have heard it, go check out her Program to Kill series. It's definitely very packed with information. I mean, it'll even be making you laugh in some ways. I mean, she had me cracking up on episode 2, but it was actually a lot of info. And I will say the music in the background is very well done. I was impressed.
Thank you.
I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. Yeah. So go check out the show. It's impressive stuff. But again, just in case all the new listeners or whatever may not know who you are, Julia, kind of give people an idea about like what you do, your podcast, and where they can find all your amazing work, please.
Yeah, thanks so much. So like you said, I have Cosmic Peach Podcast. You could probably just throw it up into Google and find it somewhere where you listen to podcasts, Spotify, Apple, wherever. I don't have YouTube because it's like you said earlier, fuck them. And they're always taking down my good shit. And I just kind of like when I get to start recording something, I don't want to have to censor myself or leave very important information out. So I just took myself off YouTube eventually because I just wanted to be able to record and say the things that I wanted to say. And luckily Apple and Spotify, maybe, you know, they're less censored, I guess, but
less anal. I
haven't gotten penalized or anything for posting shit over there. So, and I do have a Patreon for bonus content and early access for all my episodes and stuff. And I actually just did a bonus episode with Colby from Conspiracy Playtime about Jeffrey Dahmer, and that's actually a really good episode. I'm going to touch on a few of the things that we covered in that episode today, so I'm really excited. But yeah, that's where you can find me. And we were kind of talking before we started recording, but I think the last time we all got together was banging. It was, you know, a group effort and everybody was kind of contributing shit. And I loved it.
Yeah, no, it was a lot of fun. And I'm expecting this one will be good. And I'm sure, you know, sneak peek, I am hoping to make it work that her and Colby will be coming back on. I'm hoping with this whole crew, too, if they want, to cover Laurel Canyon. So I'm expecting that to be exciting and fun and informational. But yeah, thank you very much again, Julia. I'm
excited about that, too. You know, I don't know if I mentioned, maybe I did, but the Laurel Canyon book and Program to Kill are written by the same guy, Dave McGowan. So, I mean, if you love one, you're going to love the other as well, because it's just super well done research and shit that nobody really talks about. I mean, I guess people talk about Laurel Canyon stuff more now than they used to, but I mean, really people just focus on like Jim Morrison and shit. Like that's the big one person they know that has like CIA connections.
Nice. You know, one thing you said before too, which is, you know, I I'm glad that you say that you don't mess with YouTube because you're not going to censor yourself. It's unfortunate that episode, this isn't going to drop on YouTube because I'm not going to edit it. You know what I'm saying? So, like, I'm still dropping it. It's unfortunate that, YouTube is like that. I'm not going to be able to put it on there. But good for you. I'm glad you don't censor your stuff due to a platform because some people will do that. I don't think it's worth it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not worth it to me. And the Program to Kill series that's available on my show is just part of like several mini series I did. The first one was called The Pedopocracy, and then the second one was called Uncle Sam Wants Your Children. YouTube would have probably taken that down just by the fucking name of it. And then the third one was Program to Kill, and the very last series that I did with Colby is called Blood Ties, and it's all about like the superstars, as they call them, Ted Bundy and John Wayne Gacy and Jeffrey Dahmer. And those are the serial killers that they referred to as the superstars. But in Program to Kill, I kind of touched on some serial killers that have kind of gone under the radar. And actually, some of them I think they just got like a bunch of shit pinned on them that they didn't even really do. So it's crazy to me. And if you look at how some of these serial killers are operating, it's just like the fucking CIA fucking weapons of opportunity fucking, you know what I'm saying? They're literally following a program. And it's like Henry Lee Lucas, did we talk about him in the last episode? I forget. I think we might have briefly touched on him.
We brought him up. up
briefly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So are you guys familiar with this guy? He's got like periodontal disease and shit. He's got like one straight tooth in the front. Have you ever seen this guy?
I love how that becomes a fact. One of his facts.
Is he a snaggletooth?
Oh God, Teresa. Oh my God, dude.
Was that
if
a thing?
I could do share screen right now, I'd pull up a fucking picture of him because it's just like one long tooth in the front.
Amazing.
Is there a thing with like MK Ultra people like being twisted? Because like there was an MK Ultra doctor, Thresh, wasn't it? Didn't one of the guys we cover had like a bum leg or a bum arm, and another guy had a screwed up leg or something? It's like, what's up with everybody being deformed and screwed up?
Yeah,
Practically deformed.
I think Alan Dulles had a bum leg, and
there was somebody who worked with him that I think had a screwed
up. What's his name?
Gottlieb?
The main Gottlieb. Yeah, Gottlieb.
Sydney.
Yeah, that's how they bonded, because they both had like screwed up legs.
They bonded out of disabledness.
So they were both like they looked like Lieutenant Dan or what?
Yeah, basically.
I'm serious. They had nubs.
I love Lieutenant Dan.
Yeah.
Well, shit. I mean, not all of them are deformed. Some people like to say like Ted Bundy was a good-looking guy. I mean, so it's like they don't really care what you look like, or obviously because Henry Lee Lucas looks like a straight-up crackhead, but he got a Netflix series dedicated to him called The Confession Killer. And that's the first time that I had ever heard of him, is because it was real sensationalized, and everyone was posting like reels and shit on Instagram about, the Confession Killer. And essentially they kind of made fun of him. Like if we got him a chicken nugget meal and a strawberry shake, he would just start confessing to any open case, cold case file that they would put in front of him. And by the end of it, I think they said he killed like, I don't know, 127 to 200 people. And some of it didn't even make sense because he would have had to been in two places at one time. But what struck me as interesting is he knew intimate details about the crime scenes that in the murders that he was confessing to, that he shouldn't know, that was never mainstream knowledge. So let's say he didn't do these murders, but he was getting convicted for them anyways because he's confessing to them. Somebody is feeding him information. Somebody is telling him information about these crime scenes that he couldn't possibly know. So when he confesses, it almost sounds like it's probable that he could have done it, because how else would he know that? And then later on in life, he writes a book called The Hand of Death Cult or something like that, or maybe it's just called The Hand of Death. And he's talking about like getting recruited by secret military type, I don't know, it's like a program, and they're training serial killers. And he talks about this. He talks about some kind of hand of death cult that was in charge of this shit. And you know, his mom used to dress him up like a girl when he was a kid, and it ends up being like kind of multi-generational with him and his killing partner, Otis Toole. They both kind of had like multi-generational trauma in their family of like dressing the boys up like girls. And I think one of their grandmas was like a Satanist or something like that, either Otis or Henry. I can't remember now. But they always killed with weapons of opportunity, just like the CIA handout sheet would tell you to do. It was never the same way. It wasn't like Ted Bundy, where they were always strangled and bludgeoned, or, you know, Jeff Dahmer, he fucking made pulled pork sandwiches out of everybody. It was different every single time. Some would be stabbing, some would be shooting, some would get smothered, some would get decapitated. Like, it was never the same. And if you start looking at people like Richard Ramirez, who also killed with weapons of opportunity, it just starts to kind of make a little bit more sense. It's like you always say, Nick, you can't separate governmental programs and ritualistic programs. I think they're one and the same. And so when you say something is like, oh, well, they're programmed to kill, they're part of like the CIA or something like that, and they're all Satanists, I think those two things can be synonymous. I don't know about you guys, so.
Well, if you think about it, all the professional killers working for the government have to do some kind of ritual to get into that mindset in the first place. So, you know, the idea that there would be ritual killers out there sort of doing the same thing, whether or not they're associated with the government, would definitely have that same sort of process.
Mm-hmm.
This goes way back. I mean, you can look back at the pottery from the Mycenaean Greeks, and you'll see, you know, as these two warriors are going at it, you've got these two messengers for the king behind them that nobody's allowed to touch, right? And so to me, the first thing that popped into my head is like, are these guys all programmed to kill? Is this what's going on here? Maybe it's never been what we think it is. Maybe it's always been this sort of ritual human sacrifice.
Yeah. And I don't know if anybody else has anything to add about that, but I think we could go even to like one of my favorite occult serial killers, who I think I know who it is, but that's up for debate, would be Jack the Ripper. I think he was also a part of an occult society. I've done a lot of research into it, and I'm pretty sure that Helena Blavatsky was besties with this guy. He was a doctor, and he was into all these occult, and they fucking had him as a consultant on the crime scenes, dude. You know how serial killers love to go back and
this guy was like the original Fauci, kind of.
Yeah, and so this guy was in all these occult circles, and one of his besties was Helena Blavatsky. And fucking nobody puts those two pieces together. Nobody puts those two pieces together.
Yo.
His name was Dr. fucking Fuckstick. I don't know what his last name was. It was
Are
something.
you talking about H.H. Holmes? That guy?
No, it's a weird last name.
They just found genetic analysis published in January of 2025, which claims to have identified Jack the Ripper as Aaron Kosminski.
I don't fucking believe it.
Well,
And I don't believe their DNA testing either. They could fucking test some DNA. There is no DNA from they didn't collect any, and if they did, it's all fucking contaminated and shit. They were the second they rolled up on a dead body, they were all touching it and rolling it over and shit. There's no way that they can get good DNA from per victim. I will tell you though, I'm relentless, and when I get to start researching something, somebody find the name of that fucking doctor guy. His name was.
I'll look it up.
Yo, you know what I wanted to say real quick, and I didn't find out until like a week or two ago, maybe the most. You know who else the Crowley actually came out and said was Jack the Ripper?
Helena.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was I think she was the mind behind it.
He came out and wrote it somewhere. Yeah, it's Helena Blavatsky.
I don't think she was strong enough to do it herself. I think she had this I think his name was Dodgson or something. I could be wrong, but she had this doctor guy doing it, and they said whoever is doing this is probably a doctor.
He said she was using it for a ritual to actually gain more like power. And
Yes,
shit.
I know.
So if you look at some of the crime scene details or whatever, the victims were bled out first. And if anybody who is familiar with field dressing animals, that's exactly what you do first, because you want a clean, landscape or whatever, to kind of know what you're collecting and know what you're dissecting out. And then also when they said that most of the stuff the organs were removed, and it wasn't the same organ every single victim. Some had the heart, some had an intestine, some had a liver, some had a bladder. There was one where they removed the uterus, bladder, vaginal canal. Like,
yeah, see, what the fuck are they doing with that?
And then the other thing is, and Nick and I were talking about this, is that in almost all of the victims, the intestine was draped over the right side. And I was like, that means the guy was left-handed. Whoever was doing, whenever you're field dressing, and anybody chime in about field dressing, if you're not hanging them upside down to where all of the intestine or viscera falls down, you have to kind of pull the actual intestine away so that you can see what you're doing, because the moment that you nick the intestine, everything is damaged. You can't ever eat that meat or anything like that. So you want to move that completely away so that it's not in the way of anything. Nick and I were talking about that. Definitely, it was probably either harvesting organs, whether it's for ritual or for collecting of something, or experiments, because there was a lot of
Rich people.
There was a lot
Well,
of.
if you look at the victims where they were found and you connect them in the order that they were killed, it makes a big pentagram. So you tell me that it's just some random idiot out there just slashing and dashing people. The Smithsonian came out with this article and they were trying to pin it on this local butcher guy. And it's like, oh, well, he lives so far away from the crime. Fuck you. And anything the Smithsonian puts out, I'm immediately skeptical of. And I think that it's all fucking fucked up narrative anyways.
I agree, dude. Fuck the Smithsonian.
Oh, yeah.
But-
I was
do you
thinking.
happen to know some of the? Do you know where to get some of these autopsy records? Do you happen
Have
to?
you seen the movie From Hell?
Yes.
Oh yeah,
Amazing
yeah,
movie.
yeah. They blame it on an occult person too. I actually went and I just started scouring pages of fucking and you can find stuff. Thrash, what were you gonna say, man?
Sorry, Thrash.
Oh, I was just gonna mention like divination of organs and stuff, like how a lot of tribes will use like pig intestines and stuff.
The
for-
Victorian era was chock full of all of that, like organ magic. They talked about it all the time. It went hand in hand with all the surgical shit.
Let me see. Somebody take the wheel for a second. I gotta find this doctor.
Is it Dr. Thomas Neal Cream?
No, it was a weird last name. I'm telling you, it was.
Why did they?
I did a whole episode on it.
Tumblety? Another one?
Know it when I hear it.
Ostrog?
Samsonite.
Doctor.
Are we talking about Jack the Ripper right now?
Yeah.
Okay, so wasn't one of the victims apparently was Aleister Crowley's maid or nanny, who he lost his virginity to.
Really?
And how he got the nickname the Beast. So that would be very important magically to those guys to sacrifice her. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Just another interesting tie-in with that.
What would be her? I wonder what her name was.
They had a huge
Robert Donston Stevenson. That's his fucking name. There's the motherfucker right there. You're looking at Jack the fucking Ripper. I'm telling you guys. I'm telling you guys. That's him right there.
Old school Black Dahlia.
Yeah, he's got a handlebar mustache.
I like Blavatsky instead.
He was friends with her, all right? And he was a consultant on the murders. You know, it's like a lot of murderers will go back and revisit their crime scenes and they want to be a part of it and they want to like, you know, what do they say? Like get the spotlight away from them. Cause it's like, oh, it couldn't be him. He's helping out with the case.
Right.
Right. But anyways.
Like Mike was saying the Black Dahlia guy, the George Hodel.
Mm-hmm.
That guy too seems to be pretty.
Man,
tied
he's
into
Laurel
this.
Canyon. Fucking
Exactly.
Hodel is Laurel Canyon, and it's
in his Mayan house.
yes,
His Mayan temple house. Yeah.
yeah. And then his daughter, Hodel's daughter, grows up and becomes best friends with Michelle Phillips, and he was incestuous with his kids, and fucking John Phillips was incestuous with his kids. So it's like a big fucking cult that they're in, where they fuck kids. I'm sorry, this is going on YouTube, but
I'm taking it down afterwards. It's all right.
Okay, but they fuck their kids and they do this shit. The Black Dahlia was so reminiscent of the Ripper style of killing and shit. I mean, it's birds of a feather to me.
Like the Man Ray painting that was talked about, where there's like dismembered body parts basically in the painting.
They get off on it. On it. Did I mention in the last episode, and I'm sure we'll get into, well, I am going to get into it later, but one of the Podestas, either John or the fucking other one,
They were
has
both
Tony.
They have one of them has a golden Jeffrey Dahmer victim hanging in there. Tony.
Yeah, like the
Fucking
stairwell.
Tony.
Sculpture. Yeah.
Mhm. So it's like they're proud of this shit. They get off on this shit.
They're very proud of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's because it's homegrown, and I'll kind of get into that in a minute. It's because, like, if you were gonna create this ultimate evil, right, and it personifies as someone like Jeffrey Dahmer, my God, you'd be. It's like having a straight A student or some shit. Like that's what they're going for. That's their goal, is to have this horrible monster unleashed into the world. I mean, he's one of the superstars, that they talk about, but one of the other ones that I'm sure you guys might be familiar with some of the stuff I'm going to go over, though, is Manson. He's a superstar. He'll always be a superstar. Everybody thinks he's great. And even at the time, he's Laurel Canyon too. The guy from the Beach Boys, what's his name? Brian
Wilson.
Dennis Wilson.
Dennis Wilson. He had Charles Manson and all of his family members posted up in his house, and was just like paying for all their shit, and was like, "Oh, Charlie is great." And Neil Young, I think, was sucking his dick left and right. I mean, metaphorically, and with, "Oh, Charlie's great. Charlie's this and that," and Neil Young is one of the biggest fucking vaccine pushing, I'll take myself off Spotify motherfuckers ever. It's, all this shit goes together. All this shit. You guys are laughing. I'm serious. He said he was going to take himself off Spotify.
Yep.
Like, that's going to ruin somebody's day.
Yeah, like, oh,
if
fuck.
Oh no! I better go get jabbed right now, or Neil Young's going to take his 3 good songs off Spotify. Like, come on. Really?
I'll just listen to it on YouTube instead.
Right. But it's like it's the same people who are besties with Charles Manson. And so me and Colby talked about this in my new series, Blood Ties, and I'm not 100% sure that the Tate or the LaBianca murders really went down how they say they did. I think there's a lot of questions about it. I think that Charlie was doing some MK Ultra type shit on the Spawn movie ranch. I think that
Julia, JJ,
I don't know.
JJ has a game he can play. It's 6 Degrees of Charles Manson.
What the fuck is that?
One of my favorite games at Operation GCD, 6 Degrees of Charles Manson.
Yeah, it's
What is it?
You can't just talk about it. And not do it.
It's in place of Kevin Bacon's game, 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. Are you familiar with this concept?
No, not really.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, there's
What
a
is
famous
it?
game that started in the 90s. Kevin Bacon hates it. I incorporated a clip of him asking for a new Patsy in the game. So it's my make-a-wish for Kevin Bacon.
Ah,
That I find a new Patsy, Charles Manson.
okay, all right. I mean,
But
Kevin
yeah,
Bacon.
a lot of the details you're talking about surrounding Manson, the key concept that's often overlooked is the process church of the final judgment. When you're talking about the Tate and Polanskis, they were over in Rome with the process immediately preceding the murders.
Right. I think that Roman Polanski definitely had more to do with it than he lets on. That's for sure.
Oh, for sure. There was definitely the public narrative is largely spun by the DA's office and Bugliosi, who's been outed over time as a wizard of PR basically, but not of justice.
Mm-hmm. And I was just going to say, drawing this all back in, Kevin Bacon was in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, that Tarantino movie about the Manson murders.
Sure.
So, huh?
No, it was a good kind of a reimagination of the murders too, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. I thought it was a good movie. I typically like Tarantino stuff. Yeah, but Tarantino in and of himself defended Roman Polanski when he raped that fucking 13-year-old.
Yeah, he did.
Right.
100 he did.
Weirdos.
Right.
That's all it comes down.
No, he definitely did. Yeah.
You know what Colby said? He was like, why do all the creeps make all the good movies? I was like, because that goes with, if you like something, if something is massively popular, they're probably a fucking creep. Like, look at, Steven Spielberg and all that shit.
Sure.
I mean, the creepiest ones are the ones that make the best stuff. But
I think one thing that Tarantino did in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, as far as he did the whole reimagination thing of the murders, but he did incorporate a lot of the other Manson, alternative, corollary aspects to the storyline. For example, Bruce Lee, who never gets mentioned within the whole narrative of that time, he was close friends with Sharon Tate and with Jay Sebring, one of the other victims.
Mm-hmm.
So he's included in that movie. Tarantino did that on purpose because he was part of that.
I think he froze up.
Yeah, we lost him again.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that is true. What he's getting at, you really don't hear much about Bruce Lee actually being kind of connected to that whole crew. There's a lot of people that actually
There's
connect.
a lot of interesting gems in there. Like, for instance, when they're going into El Coyote. I've said this before on an episode. I don't quite remember which one. But if you look in the background at the movie theater, in the background, there's a pornography film, but it's the first pornography film that was shown in movie theaters. And there's a scene where Sharon Tate's going in and she says something like I didn't know they showed nudie films at the premieres. And the key tie-in with that is that the mafia basically ran the pornography ring in LA. And it's kind of hinting at that because if you know who actually funded that first film, it was the mafia of LA, which ties into the other victims, not the Tate victims, but the
LaBianca?
What's his name? Yeah, the LaBiancas, yes, because he was like a bookie and stuff for the mob.
Yeah, he had $250,000 unpaid gambling debts. And then they say, oh, he was a random target. There was no connection. There was no rhyme or reason for why the LaBiancas got it. And then you really start looking at that guy. I think his name was Lino LaBianca.
Yes, Lino.
Man, he was a shady shitter. And they do that shit. They mix some random shit with some on purpose shit to throw you off. Because nobody's going to go digging and find out this guy's got mob ties and he's got $250,000 in gambling debts. Nobody's looking into that. But he did. And then he ended up fucking dead as shit with his whole family. So, and then it's like I said before, I think Roman Polanski had way more to do with Sharon than he lets on. I think he fucked off out of town. So again, to deflect guilt, oh, I was out of town. I have an alibi. I wasn't even in the country when it happened. But you can usually look at the husband when something like that goes down anyways.
Did you ever see the Jay Sebring documentary that came out was it 5-6 years ago?
No, was it HBO or something?
It was on Amazon. And it's very interesting because it has apparently Sharon was gonna divorce Polanski and get back with Sebring, And they even have like the lawyer and the attorney on the documentary and everything.
Mm-hmm. Somebody
I believe that
just
was
mentioned
Sebring's
the
nephew that
ninth
made
gate
that.
too.
I believe that was
there
Sebring's
like a
nephew that
family
made
tie.
that. Yeah, and that's another aspect of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood that they included was the Steve McQueen at the pool party talking about the love triangle between Roman, Sebring, and Sharon Tate. Because again, part of the Manson lore that Tarantino incorporated, Steve McQueen was supposed to be there that night, and apparently stopped at a gas station on the way over to the Tate Polanski house and met himself a nice lady for the evening at the gas station.
And McQueen supposedly after the murders went to Sebring's and got rid of a lot of the like cocaine and stuff he was selling.
Sure.
Well, and Jay Sebring was tight with Jim Morrison. He's the one who gave him that famous haircut. So, I mean, they're
Frank
all
Sinatra.
right. They're all connected to each other,
Yo,
and they're all.
And Sebring was a Scientologist too, as well. These Scientology process connections go throughout that whole social circle of folks in Laurel Canyon.
Mm-hmm. Dude, when we cover the Laurel Canyon, I hope you guys join us for that episode because I'll go through the whole fucking list of them. I mean, Dave McGowan does such a great job connecting the dots with some of that stuff. Who's friends with who and like these murders and shit. And Charles Manson definitely goes Laurel Canyon and Program to Kill. He's in both books because it's like I said before, you can't ever take something like the Tate murders and the LaBianca stuff at face value. Like, oh, he was just a crazy guy and he brainwashed these people and they went and did this stuff. That is absolutely not what happened. But and then to go as far as like the swastika and all that, I mean, that's just like throwing you off the scent even more. Oh, we'll just make him carve a swastika in his head and do all this stuff. But they want you so badly to believe that this mainstream narrative where there's just crazy people out there that'll just come to your house and just kill you for no reason and everybody should be terrified. They love doing that to people. So, I mean, I think the serial killer was kind of born in the 1960s. I think just like the counterculture movement, I think it was almost like a 5-layer burrito. They had like all these different programs running at the same time. They had the serial killer program. They had the fucking counterculture movement going on. And they also had like women's like equality stuff going on at the same time. I mean, it really was a time to be alive for sure. It almost makes you wonder how anybody made it fucking out alive.
Just a quick. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say in the Vietnam War, I mean, a lot of this stuff boils down to the whole program to kill. The reason why the cartoons were violent, why they had to start showing movies where people were shooting each other, because in World War II, a lot of soldiers couldn't pull the trigger, so it bottomed up. But the Vietnam War is why a lot of these ops, I think, were going on. I mean,
and the fucking Phoenix program.
Yeah. And a lot of these murders, there was like 3 serial killers in the same area.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so if there is some sort of program going on, I mean, it's so obvious that all these serial killers are magically coming out of this one city at the same exact time.
They're definitely saturated for sure, right? In like one geographical region, right?
I was actually going to get to another one that came out, but Teresa, you go first.
Oh, yeah. So I think actually a long time ago when I was researching for an episode that we did with Colby, me, Nick, and Colby did an episode on Elon Musk. And his mom, Mae Musk, and her twin, Kay, were friends with Charles Manson. This is a rumor, of course, but like an interesting one nonetheless. And that Kay, apparently there's record of her visiting him in prison. They gave him like TVs and like other luxuries. Mae Musk apparently appears in the Helter Skelter book, like a photo of her.
Oh my God.
So that's a weird.
These fucking assholes, I swear.
Supposedly the first edition she's in.
In the first edition.
Only the first edition, I think.
Okay.
There's like a specific
well, she's in
picture.
there.
Yeah.
Wow. That's fucked up.
Right?
That is so fucked.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I'm saying though. It's like all these people who are like, like the Beach Boy guy and Neil Young and fucking apparently Elon Musk's mom, right? Like they're all friends with this guy, and they all used to like sing his praises and shit. And,
Jack Nicholson, Dennis Hopper.
Yep, Jack
other
Nicholson
guys there.
too.
The lady from Mamas and Papas.
Mama Cass.
Well, John Phillips was noted on an INS document as funding the Process Church's activities in Los Angeles. So, and Mama Cass had her run-ins with Scientology in the process as well. So again, you're talking about the same kind of throughput with these cults, and I think these cults operate some of that mind control stuff in the program to kill aspects. Not just Manson, but you also got Sirhan. Old Double Sirhan was noted as well in investigatory documents as attending an English sex cults or English cults sex magic rituals, which they're referring to the process in that statement.
Well, that's like what Henry Lee Lucas was saying. He was trained by a cult that worked with the government to produce these mind controlled killers. And I don't know how much you guys know about Zodiac or how much we talked about Zodiac in the last episode, but that's another one that came out of San Francisco, kind of near the Presidio area, kind of near fucking the Michael Aquino stuff. And that's why I think personally he could have been one of many Zodiac killers. I do believe that there were many killers. I don't think that it was just one guy. And the fact that they always get like this bitchin' moniker after that, like maybe two people die and all of a sudden you got like a guy with this bitchin' moniker, the Zodiac, the Green River Killer, the, Jack the Ripper, like all these names, it gives it like a sensationalism and it gives them almost like a celebrity status. And then you have people getting these codes that are sent in by the Zodiac and they're obsessing over them, trying to crack these codes and shit. And the motherfucker showed up to one of the murders with a full ass costume on. Full ass costume, an apron with a big Zodiac sigil on it and sunglasses. And none of the other survivors talk about a guy in a full blown like Batman suit coming to murder you. And then, they give him, it's the Zodiac. And then he addresses himself as Zodiac. So I think it was just many people working in tandem doing this shit. And they just put one bad guy as like the main focus who is never caught. But there's always like military boot prints that show up at all the crime scenes with the Zodiac. The taxi driver that was shot near the Presidio Heights area. There were like 3 kids that called the police and gave an identification of the man that they saw fleeing the crime scene. And instead of giving the police that description, they said, look for a black guy. And that's not even what the fucking kids said. They said they saw a tall white guy with a crew cut haircut with boots on fleeing the scene. And then they told the police officers, look for an armed black man.
Sure.
And gave the real Zodiac, whoever it was, time to fucking make his away. So I think that these guys are protected from on high. I think that they don't want to be caught. They don't want anybody to catch these guys. It like just terrifies people. But I don't know what you guys think about the multiple assailants for the Zodiac, but I definitely think it was multiple assailants.
For sure.
The George Hodel, his son claims that it was him. Like he's
oh my god, wouldn't that be a fucking twist?
Yeah, he claims that like when they stopped that he moved to like Indonesia or the Philippines.
Oh shit.
Yeah, and he was like an old man then, and he married like a Filipino wife after he left San Francisco.
Oh my god. But I think let's just say George Hodel was one and Michael Aquino was one. And I think that, when you look at possible suspects for the Zodiac, you'll find like these huge long lists. And all the reasons that they give are pretty credible. Like, okay, that makes sense. That person could be the Zodiac. And what I'm trying to say is maybe all of them were the Zodiac for all we know. Like maybe they were all there was a group of people doing this shit. And, something else weird about, well, I'm sure, did you guys watch the movie with Robert Downey Jr.?
Sure.
You did? I liked
David
it.
Fincher
I thought,
film?
David Fincher, yeah. I thought it was a
Yep.
great movie. But
Yeah, it's all based on one book. So I think that's what a lot of the people's problems are, because it's based on that one book.
Yeah, because they try to put everything on the fat guy that works at the factory.
Right.
And
But
I
again,
just,
so there's a lot of interesting aspects that are overlooked though in that story. But I'm gonna interject real quick relative to specifically framing other people. So the Edward Wayne Edwards factor is often ignored. I agree with you. It's definitely a team of Satanists. The letters, there's overt references to Crowleyisms and Thelema in the letters, in the Zodiac letters. No one wants to address that aspect. It's obvious. I'm not even that schooled in Thelema or Crowleyism.
I'm glad you said this.
I can see the shit in the letters. It's pretty obvious.
Well,
if I trained a kindergartner how to read Crowley, they would identify the same characteristics in these letters. That's how that's how I find it. How obvious it is.
oh, I'm 100.
I think it just due to the one time. I mean, JJ said it as a joke, but I mean, in all honesty, I think it does look a little bit like the Zodiac Killer's hood. I mean, I have a hood to the Astrum Argentum.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
I've posted it.
Well,
and it's very much like the hood that the Zodiac Killer showed up with, and it's I've seen, especially people like Thelemites, but it is a type of like jewelry and stuff I've seen people wear a lot. They'll wear that circle with an X in it, which does kind of look like a crosshair, and it's the symbol of Malkuth. Now, when you're starting to screw around with the Kabbalah. So, in my opinion, that guy's outfit could have literally have been somebody who, in my opinion, might be into Thelemic stuff. I could easily turn my hood inside out and look like the Zodiac Killer.
Yeah.
One of the things I liked about the movie From Hell is that they incorporated a lot of that Kabbalah Masonic symbolism. Like some of that shit wasn't seen on film before that time, and they went hard with all the rituals.
But I think that's like really real. I think that like the Zodiac and shit, I think that's the realest shit.
There's so much of a crossover between the actions of these different groups. They just do the same things. Go ahead.
Well, the codes and the ciphers in that, and the symbols, and the fact that everything's done by the stars and the Zodiac, that's very Saturnian too. And there's inner orders of some of these Saturnian lodges called the FOGG lodges, and their whole thing is human sacrifice. Yeah, and this is old school black German magic, and it's all about the stars, and it's all about Zodiac, and so. And they wear black hoods too, so I mean, it could be possible. I haven't looked into it that much, but I mean, it's ciphered like that. The symbols are similar.
Well, and they leave a lot of details out when they make movies about the Zodiac and even documentaries. They make, I just have to address a comment that popped up about Satanists having great eyebrows. I'm like the least Satanist of all of us because I don't fucking have any. So,
I was thinking of Aquino when they said that.
Yeah, he used to like gel his shit up like
yeah,
a fucking,
caterpillars.
like, yeah. But like, okay, so let me just give you some info on the first. The first is what they call it, Zodiac victim. It was a girl named Darlene, and then the guy, what was his name? Michael Majo, I'm pretty sure was his last name.
Yep.
And so Darlene was telling her friends a couple of weeks before she was murdered that she was receiving like packages from someone, but wouldn't say who it was from, and that she had an ex-husband that was weird and was in Mexico or something, and maybe he had killed somebody. And she was telling, yeah, there you go. Look at that shit.
Yeah.
Fucking Aquino's eyebrows. But so all this stuff was going down, and she was telling her friends about it. Like, I have an ex-husband that maybe killed somebody, and I'm getting packages in the mail and stuff like this. And the mainstream narrative is that Darlene went to go pick up this Mike guy, and that they were going to go to a lover's lane situation and like make out. But what's weird is the front door to Michael Majo's house was left wide open. All the lights in his house were on. It looked like he had left in a hurry. Darlene's talking about getting mysterious packages from her ex-husband or somebody. And that she's worried about it, and then she ends up dead. And like, I mean, I can't even believe the one guy, he shot both of them like 8 times or 10 times or something like that, and the one guy lived. But I mean, it's just like the Darlene murder seemed like she knew her attacker, and that she had almost kind of like had a foreboding feeling that she was in danger. So it doesn't fit the rest of the Zodiac killings if they were all just random acts of violence. And I think that it was a group of individuals.
Saying like that's a hit?
Yeah, I think it was. And you know,
no, I agree with you. I agree with you for sure. She had direct connections to the Process Church in her address
Darlene
books.
did. Oh, my God.
So did her husband Jim Phillips Crabtree, the guy you're referring to as her ex-husband. They were quasi domestic married, apparently.
Right. Yeah. So
they were living down the Hayden Ashbury, and they had Process Church connections in that address book that she had on her person. And it was I think my kind of take on the hit is she was able to identify the people in that. It was actually Jim Phillips Crabtree's book, her quote unquote ex-husband, his address book, and he's a very spooky figure within this Intel Occult network.
What do you think about the Zodiac being kind of like the son of Sam? Because like he admitted to some of the shit, but then he said there are other people working with me that they never went and looked for.
Sure.
So I feel like Zodiac could be like that.
I know. I think that's exactly what's going on for sure. Yeah. So I think that Edward Wynn Edwards guy, I look at him as reference to like this hand of death cult situation that Henry Lee Lucas was talking about. I look at Edward Wynn Edwards as actually being like a general in that hand of death cult. And a lot of the crimes that Lucas and Toole were taking credit for were actually crimes that Edward Wynn Edwards was personally involved in. And at the same time, they're taking credit for it. He's making parole on some arson charges. Where in those arson charges, they found a Marietta, Georgia police uniform in this house in Pennsylvania he burnt down for insurance fraud that he went to prison for there. But he had infiltrated, speaking of these folks going into back to the crime scene, he infiltrated the Atlanta Child Killings Task Force, faking to be a Marietta police sergeant. So he's very likely in the Zodiac killer team. For example, there was the Blue Rock Springs Park murder. I believe that was December of '68, and then July of '69.
Is that the one where he showed up in the costume?
No, so that was the first one. Was our Lover's Lane one, much like the Darlene and Michael Mageau one. So, and Edward Wynn Edwards is actually so out of all these suspects for the Zodiac, the only person that's confirmed has committed numerous Lover's Lane murders in the exact fashion as the Zodiac in numerous states over multiple decades. In fact, is Edward Wynn Edwards. No one else on that suspect list has ever confirmed murder of any regard, especially the exact same MO involved in the Zodiac killings. In addition to that, the third crime scene there at Lake Berryessa with
that's the costume.
That's the hood.
One, I think.
That's the costume one. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the middle of the day. That's later in the afternoon, so it's daylight hours. It's the only one in daylight hours. But all the details that the costumed killer gives to the victims, right? All those details were details of Edward Wynn Edwards' life. So that was 1969. All those details that he had given the victims that day was 1959. They occurred. He broke out of a Montana prison. He murdered a prison guard. He went on the run to Mexico. He was, that all did occur in Edward Wynn Edwards' life, but that was 1959, and that's what made him the number one most wanted person on the FBI's most wanted list. The youngest. All
right. So that makes a ton of sense.
This is diabolical.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have to say, let's just say he's one of them, right? And there is others that have not been identified. I have to say, and I'm not saying my favorite because I love fucking serial killers or something like that. But if I was going to pick a favorite serial killer, it's definitely not Zodiac. I mean, the motherfucker is sloppy. He leaves people alive. He doesn't even all the way kill people. He had 2 survivors. If you're going to be a badass serial killer and put a fucking hood on your head and do all this codes and shit, at least kill your victims. Like, he's not even good at it. He's like the shittiest serial killer ever. Yeah. So, but they have to keep like this narrative of the serial killer going because like as Zodiac started to fade out, Ted Bundy was actually on a plane flying to San Francisco where the Zodiac murders were going down. Nobody knows why he was going there, but as soon as he gets back to Seattle, he starts ripping through and fucking killing all these bitches all over Seattle. So what do you think? What you guys are laughing, and it's the damn truth. It's like, what was he doing in San Francisco?
Sure.
Can I bring up a point that I keep thinking about? It's okay. So you brought up earlier, like you feel like the serial killer thing was kind of like created around the 60s and stuff like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I really feel like Michael Aquino has some weird stuff.
Dude, I've said that for the longest.
Like Mike has pointed out, like with the other episodes we've done, like the PsyOps and Psywar and all that. And again, that Ghost in the Machine video on YouTube, go ahead and watch it.
Does it talk about Aquino?
No, but he basically created that whole
thing.
Psywar.
Mind War.
It's in full effect now. We're seeing it. Full Psywar on all levels.
Sure.
You know, it's just...
He started his whole thing right there in Vietnam, right there. And then he was writing a lot of the rituals for the Satanic Church. And
Temple of Set.
Yeah, Temple of Set.
Do you know what the Alice in Wonderland technique is?
About like disassociating the kids and shit?
Well, it's sort of like that. What you do is using NLP. This was big in the Scientology church. So L. Ron had all of his top operators learn how to repeat nonsensical phrases and then follow it up with an anchoring word like, are we clear? So we're talking about these guys who are using the E-meter, using these techniques to try and break down people's resistance to interrogation. So if you look at all these different events, it's meant to confuse and throw people off. It's just the beginning part of that kind of Alice in Wonderland technique. And so they got to follow it up with something concrete to try and get the population moving in a certain direction.
Yeah, and
one man's E-meter is another man's P-scope, Headless.
Well, I think that's why they do like multiple projects at one time to like get you to focus on several different things, because it's like I said, they have the counterculture shit going on, they have the serial killer shit going on, and then they have like women's equality shit going on, and they keep pushing women to be more independent, and then they're sending people like Ted Bundy out there to murder them for doing it.
Right.
And so it's very counterintuitive, and they do that shit on purpose. It's very much by design. And it's like I said, as soon as like the Zodiac thing started to fizzle out, Ted Bundy's on a plane to San Francisco. God knows what he's doing there. Then flies back to Seattle, becomes the psychopath that we know he is today. And
breaks out of jail.
Yeah, and so
Colorado.
Ted
flies
Bundy,
around under his own identity.
Right. And like he's political too. He worked for the Republican Party. You know, he was going to law school, and a lot of the serial killers are either political or they're military. That's something that's a common thread between a lot of them.
Political.
John Wayne Gacy, yeah, exactly.
And like the crazy thing about Ted is all these girls started going missing in different states, but they couldn't quite connect to them. So so all these states got together and they had this big conference, and they were like, we gotta identify this guy before he gets any more girls. And are you guys familiar with the true crime author Anne Rule? She writes a bunch of, she's basically like, before podcasts were cool, she wrote books about all these serial killers and shit. She's a true crime author. But she happened to be friends with Ted Bundy, worked with him at the Rape Crisis Center, if you can believe that. Ted Bundy worked at the Rape Crisis Center.
Wow.
And so she attended this conference where they're saying, oh, we got to get this guy who's taking all these girls, whatever. And Anne Rule attends that conference, and then a couple of days later, a bunch of girls, I think 2 girls go missing from Lake Sammamish State Park, and a bunch of witnesses say that the person that approached both of those girls identified himself as Ted. And the first person to turn his name over to the Ted Squad, is what they called it, was Ann Rule. And she keeps popping up in Ted Bundy's life over and over again. She knows some of the victims. She's oddly connected with the Ted Bundy case. And she makes herself famous afterwards for writing a book about him. And she just pops up, and it's real weird. And
didn't Ted Bundy also escape from prison?
Twice.
So,
yeah, twice. Yeah.
Yeah, and got airline tickets under his actual name while he was on the lam.
So, I mean,
no
it's
problem
just
going
weird
like, hey, my name's
stuff like
Ted Bundy.
that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like, think about this. The day that they got the name Ted and they formed like this Ted Squad or whatever, it was at a beach where they were having a police picnic. And there was like hundreds of police officers there, but nobody. Okay, there was like 500 people on this beach, and there was at least 100 of them were police officers. Nobody saw anything, and then, so everybody turned over all the pictures that they took that day at the beach, and there were thousands and thousands of pictures that were taken that day of people frolicking around and having a good time at the beach. Not one picture of Ted anywhere. Not a photobomb picture of Ted, not a picture of Ted in the distance. Ted, it's like Ted's not fucking there. And both of the witnesses that gave his name and said, we saw a man approaching this person, and they had identified themselves as Ted. One person said that he had blonde hair. One person said that he, had dark short hair. Like none of the witnesses' statements were adding up. It was almost like they were told to say that. And then all of a sudden, Ann Rule is like, oh, I know who it is. It's Ted Bundy. I work right next to him at the Rape Crisis Center. She just happens to know him. And fucking, he doesn't even match the descriptions that were given from the witnesses at the park. So how is it? I mean, guys, it doesn't make any sense.
Wasn't he very politically connected?
Yes, he was. He was.
Yeah.
And,
special assistant to the Attorney General of the state, right?
Mm-hmm. And so
I believe.
They find out.
Wasn't there a claim? Wasn't there a claim that some of the girls that Ted had, killed or whatever, that they were actual hits? Not all of them, but just some of them, and that some were hits, but then some were just random to kind of make it all look like a serial killer.
That's exactly what they do. Mm-hmm.
That it was a hit.
Yeah, because that was actually the next thing in my notes that I was going to tell you guys about is 2 of them in particular were kept alive somewhere for a long period of time before that they were murdered. And that was completely outside the norm for all the other Bundy victims. They were always abducted and immediately killed shortly thereafter. But there were 2 in particular that one of them was a police chief's daughter, and the other one was like somebody else high up's daughter. And they found out that they had been kept somewhere for like over a week, that they had been completely drained of blood, and that their bodies had been dumped, but they weren't bludgeoned like the rest of the girls. And one of the girls that was kept for over a week and then totally bled out, Ted was on a hunting trip like with one of his friends when she supposedly was being held captive somewhere and being bled out. So that didn't even make sense for him to have done it. And yet he goes down as being the murderer.
Didn't he even do some other stuff where like it was almost like some Brian Kohlberger type shit? He walked up into like a sorority house and just stabbed a bunch of bitches.
But
and like
Nick,
all in separate rooms and like nobody ever heard anything.
That was Tallahassee, right?
That was Tallahassee. Yeah, that was the Chi Omega house. Yeah. But think about it, Nick. It doesn't fucking fit his MO.
Yeah.
Because he would snatch and grab, right? One single female, get them in the car, bash them over the head, dump their body, and then he would necrophile them. he would like to go back to his dump sites and like fuck the corpses and shit over a period of time. The Chi Omega fucking sorority house, he just went in there with a fucking club and just started bashing bitches over the head. That didn't fit the narrative. He liked to be secretive about what he was doing. I'm telling you right now, he was probably responsible for a third of the murders that have been pinned on him.
Right.
The rest of this shit was random as fuck, and it had to be other people because, all right, you guys know one of the Ted Bundy survivors that they always show on like Dr. Phil and shit. Her name is Carol Duranch, and he picked her up at a shopping mall, and like she broke loose from him and fucking ran away. All right,
It's an unfortunate name.
Yeah, right.
Duranch.
So, and she's also Mormon. I should get Heidi.
Wasn't Ted a Mormon?
He converted
Ted
to
get Mormon for a
Mormonism.
minute?
Yeah, he
went
did.
Mormon
He
for a
did.
minute.
Uh-huh. But so the shopping mall where he abducted Carol Duranch, right, was exactly, I want to say, 25 miles from another abduction site where he supposedly Carol got away and he went to a school, picked someone else up, and murdered him because he got mad that Carol got loose. But the problem is the time frame in which Carol got away and the second victim was abducted was 15 minutes.
Wow.
And there is no way humanly possible for Ted to have gotten from point A, the abduction site of Carol Duranch, to point B, the school where the other girl was kidnapped, in 15 minutes. There's no fucking way he could do it. And all of the witnesses told the police that it was a guy with long, sandy, blonde hair that abducted the girl from the school. But what did they do? They put that on Ted too. And so he's constantly getting murders piled up onto him that he couldn't have even fucking physically been there to do it. But this is how they create this narrative of the serial killer. And God only knows who really abducted that girl from the school. We'll never fucking know.
What if they just bring them out on camera in shackles and stuff, and they really didn't do anything, and then they just get to go like
I've wondered that,
golfing and like go to Africa, travel Europe and stuff.
Yeah,
when they need another interview, they just bring out Vance. He does his crazy little shit.
Yeah. You guys remember in our last episode, I said I think a lot of these serial killers are just actors playing a role, because I don't even think that they could have been in the position where they could have done half of the crimes that they say that they did. And Ted is one of them. So going back to something
what
that
was may I interject real quick? What was that park you'd mentioned before that Ted Bundy got some of his victims from there in Washington State?
Lake Sammamish. Lake Sammamish.
Sammamish.
Whatever that park is. Speaking of Brian Kohberger, I think that's the park he was supposedly at the night of the murders. Strangely enough.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
and
whatever that park is down
hair?
by Pullman. I don't think so. He's got bushy eyebrows though.
Well, they said whoever got those girls. That's how they found that son of a bitch.
Yeah, he did walk up into a house and just started to stab him, mofos.
Well, I don't think Brian Kohberger did it, but somebody did.
Somebody did.
Yeah.
Somebody with those damn bushy eyebrows.
To the Chi Omega house that Nick was talking about, where he just went in there with a tree branch and just started clubbing bitches over the head, right? So in that trial, I'm serious. He did.
Bam, bam, bam.
The reason they were able to get him in the Chi Omega sorority trial is one of the victims had a bite mark on their ass. This was the thing. This is what got him the elusive fucking bite mark evidence. Here's the problem. They later went back and admitted that they did not have the original bite mark that was found on the victim. They said that they had cut it out of their skin, put it in a solution that accidentally dissolved it, and that they had to go to prison and get molds of Ted Bundy's teeth and press them into random dead people's asses at the morgue and take pictures of it to reproduce what they saw on the first dead body. Does that make sense to you guys?
No, not whatsoever.
Why would you, if Ted Bundy bit one of the bitch's asses and you had it right there and you could have took a picture of it and compared it to his teeth? No, what they did though, they cut it out of the dead girl's ass. They put it in a solution. Whoops, just happened to be acid. It totally dissolved it. And they go to the prison. They make molds of Ted Bundy's teeth. And then they go to the morgue and they press those teeth into the butt cheeks of random dead people. Then they take a picture of that. Then they took that to trial and said, look, his teeth match these bite marks. It has to be him.
Yeah, I would argue these investigators might have some necrophiliac stuff going on in their lives.
That's what I was thinking. I'm like,
Right?
what the
What kind of
heck?
freaks are they?
They literally gave him the death penalty over evidence that they created
Right.
at the fucking trial. So we don't even know that Ted Bundy was in the fucking house that night. I mean, literally, you guys. And so the last victim that they pinned on him was a 12-year-old girl named Kimberly Leach. And for that to have happened, he would have had to been in two places at one time. He would have had to been in Tallahassee and this neighboring city where Kimberly was, like pretty much at the same time for those two things to happen. And also Kimberly being 12 years old was completely outside of his MO. He had never murdered somebody that young before. It was always like older women. So, I mean, it didn't make sense to me. Also, Kimberly was completely drained of blood, which didn't match any of the other victims.
Didn't they come out
Sure.
here recently saying that MOs were not real? Like people say that serial killers always deviate out of their MO. And I have never believed that. I think that they, especially like with like genuine serial killers, they never kill outside of the racial line, outside of their ethical line. They always have a signature of some sort or whatever. But I believe it years ago that there were, I guess, FBI, whatever statement saying that no, serial killers deviate all the time. And it was new to me that they were going to incorporate that into the profile forensic.
Yeah, I think the serial killer profiling is another psyop. Actually, I think they have.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they came out with that shit to kind of almost throw people off the trail. So they wouldn't be looking for random shit, which I mean, look at Henry Lee Lucas. If he really did all that stuff, they were completely random and never the same. And, you know, Ted too. And Ted in several interviews said that there were multiple people involved. He said that. He said there are multiple people involved. I'm not the only one doing this. And girls continued to go missing for several years after they locked Ted up. And by the way, talking about what JJ was talking about earlier, what are the chances this motherfucker successfully escapes prison twice and then just so happens to like find a log cabin in the woods filled with supplies and shit that he would need to live for a couple of days, and then the second time he just happened to find a car and then a bus ticket, then a plane ticket, then a train ticket, and then I mean, it's almost by design that he's let back out if he really is doing this stuff in the first place. But I mean, like, really, you guys are talking about ass vampires. I'm not even going there.
Sorry.
I'm not even going there, you guys.
Well, I would say as far as the changing MOs or the varying MOs, but still having a signature, again, I think Edwin Edwards is a great example of that. He definitely killed in various different fashions. He did do lovers lanes, you know, shooting them Zodiac style. He definitely so the other thing he did Zodiac style was he would set up other folks up for the murders. He would build circumstantial cases around folks. He would insert himself into these folks' lives. He would make fake certificates of psychiatry, rent an office, set up a shop as a fake psychiatrist, insert himself into folks' lives. So as far as like folks like Arthur Lee Allen and the Zodiac story, looking like he did it because circumstantially, that's actually his MO. So that is the Edwin Edwards signature move. is to
Yeah,
do exactly that. He actually testified in some folks' trials that he set up. Like that's how deep dude went.
Well, the thing is like it's kind of like I think some authentic serial killers have MOs, and I think some don't that are working in groups. And it's like maybe everybody has their own, there's a knife guy, and there's a gun guy, and there's a guy that likes to suffocate him, and then so it always looks kind of like random because it's different people doing this. You know what I'm saying? Like
I know exactly what you're saying. I almost look at it like though like in a different perspective. So like. And again, I use Edward Wayne Edwards is the mold in which I shape a lot of my conversations of serial killers on, because it's somebody I've studied a lot. After reading about the guy, I've done a lot of studying the dude, how this dude's existed in life. I mean, the guy went on a speaking of like Rodney Alcala dating game serial killer. Edward Wayne Edwards got on the show to tell the truth, and fooled most of the folks on there. Yeah, and this guy was a very devious character. So, but anyway, he as far as I don't look at it necessarily as the weapons used or necessarily the precise manner in which the murder's accomplished. For example, though, the Zodiac wrote about in one of his letters how he got his rocks off murdering folks, strangling people. Well, Edward Wayne Edwards, one of the murders he got busted for from DNA evidence was semen on a victim's jeans that he literally got his rocks off strangling this woman in Wisconsin.
So fucking and that's the thing.
That's kind of the way when I look at it is in that regard. It's not necessarily like the precise weapons, but it's the same kind of tactic, right?
Right.
That is literally that was his thing. Like,
did Bundy do that to one of them or all of them or something?
Do what?
Strangle him? Very well may have.
Before?
Yeah. Robin Williams. There's actually conspiracy theory about him. I forget what it is now, but so like Ted gets 2 death penalties, and he gets put in a cell right next to Otis Toole, who is also a programmed serial killer. So for me, that's just like it's almost like a full circle moment. They're one of their first projects, Henry Lee Lucas and Otis Toole. Right. And then all these other serial killers in the middle. And then you got Ted, who goes on death row right next to Otis Toole. They're like in the same cell block. Like, really? Sure. It's just weird, right? Weird to me. Yeah, it's weird to me. Did we just lose somebody?
You got a headless down.
Yeah, he had to get going. He texted me.
Damn.
Yeah, it's okay.
Well,
what's your thoughts on Henry Lee Lucas getting clemency from George Bush #2?
Man, I think they're probably like long lost fucking cousins or something. They're probably third cousins, twice removed. I swear to you.
Used to go over to cousin Henry's house when he was a child.
Yeah. Because Henry was he loved the Texas Rangers and shit. And it was just, I don't know. Did you guys watch True Detective, the show True Detective, that first season with Matthew McConaughey? Like, think of the ending of that, right? How the guy at the end is like cousins with like all the people that were doing all that. That's right. How I think of Henry Lee Lucas. I think he was family. Yeah. He might have been the fucked up cousin that they kept in the closet because he looked crazy, but I think he could have been related.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many theories floating around out there about like, what's her name? Bush is Crowley's kid, Barbara.
Barbara.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of these people are related, man. I think a lot of these higher up people have family members, and actually one of the Kennedys' nephews murdered a girl named Martha Moxley or Martha Mosley. I can't remember her last name, but just beat her to death with a golf club, and just nothing ever happened. I mean, you got to understand, like, they'll cover this stuff up if it needs.
I thought he went to prison, didn't he?
I don't think not for like Martha.
I think they finally bust him as an adult. Yeah, I think they bust him as an adult
for Martha's murder.
I believe so.
Well, that's great if they did.
Because Mark Furman, of all people, was involved in the private investigation that helped turn that case over. Strangely,
Well,
enough.
hell
Mark
yeah,
Fuhrman.
because everybody
Mark
knew
Fuhrman,
he
the
did it.
Nazi.
Mm-hmm. You guys want to talk about Gacy and Dahmer a little bit?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Sure.
Hey, real quick, I just it's the FOGC Lodge that I was talking about. It's actually Freemasonic Order of the Golden Centurion.
You talking about for Zodiac?
Yeah, potentially. Like when I was looking into them, they're human sacrifice Saturnian Lodge, and apparently they're Freemasons too.
Oh,
It's an old lodge, so I'm not saying it's modern, but when you look into what they were doing and the types of stuff,
Sure.
Did you guys watch Peggy Sue Got Married? It's like an old movie. It's got like Nicolas Cage in it. And she like goes back in time and shit. They literally have a whole Masonic. Oh God, you guys got to watch it. I feel like Nicolas Cage is into some shit.
Oh, I think
really
so.
do.
He's got a movie production called Saturn.
The whole
Films or
Coppola
something.
family for sure.
Oh,
Definitely.
for sure. But so getting on Gacy, I listened to this podcast. It was called The Clown and the Candyman, and it linked. Did you listen to it, Nick?
Yes. Yeah.
All right. So you're going to know what I'm talking about. It linked John Wayne Gacy with this huge pedophile network and this guy named Dean Coral, who they call the Candyman. And fucking people want to talk about Gacy having a high body count. I think he had 33 victims is what they said, Gacy.
33 films.
Well, Dean Coral had 27, was it? Or 28? And nobody knows who this guy is. He got all these boys, tortured them to death, raped them, and then he buried their bodies in his boat shed. 28 of them. And nobody talks about this guy. And he said he told his accomplices that he was part of a larger pedophile network that was working out of Dallas. And so did John Wayne Gacy. And they actually had common associates.
Jeff Paskey,
his name was
right?
Philip
Sure.
Paskey.
Oh,
Yeah.
Philip Paskey. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. So Philip Paskey was working with Dean Coral and Philip Paskey was working with John Wayne Gacy. And now here's the thing. Just like with Ted Bundy, there are some victims that are attributed to Gacy that he was fucking out of town, fucking miles away when these people got abducted, but yet they're considered Gacy victims. And I think that Gacy could have been something like a finisher kind of guy, like where these other pedophiles would have their fun and then bring them back to Gacy to finish them, because there's no way he could have abducted all of them. He was in construction. He was on out of town projects when a lot of these kids went missing, and it just doesn't make sense whatsoever. It's like you guys were saying he was political. He has a picture of himself with one of the first ladies. He said that there were other people involved, but nobody likes to talk about that shit. Just like Berkowitz, there are other people involved. Bundy said it too. There are other people involved, but we just like, it's like literally like we won't hear that. It has to be just him. I mean, I don't know. What do you guys think about? Are you familiar with this Dean Coral guy?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I believe there's also a connection with those same fellas and Ace Brown of the Yonkers Tale with Son of Sam, the pedophile guy who was running kids through Times Square, but was the local pimp in Yonkers.
Well, and then there's like the Colonel guy that's talked about with
Sanders.
Gacy, but then there's the Colonel that's also talked about with the Franklin scandal.
Michael,
Yeah, and the guy that was involved with the Gacy one lived in Colorado. The one with the Franklin scandal lived in Colorado in Buena Vista, and he had a house near a place called Elephant Rock.
Monarch Mountain.
And that's all talked about, like with the Franklin scandal, but then also there's a Colonel that's involved with the John Wayne Gacy murders.
And then, Paul Benassi, the guy with 17 personalities, he's one of the first ones that's identified Michael Aquino as the Colonel. So, I mean, I think there are definitely ties there. And there was another guy they brought up in that podcast I listened to with Dean Coral and John Wayne Gacy. His name was like something Sherman, I think. But he had one of the first
John
pedophile.
Norman, I think.
John Norman. Was he the one that had the
That's
first
the one that
pedophile
passed.
island?
I think that was the one that Paskey might have connected him with.
That was the one in Dallas, right?
Yes, because they were both in jail together.
Pedophile island.
They were both in jail together, and they supposedly, I don't know how truthful this is because this is a little ballsy. They were printing out like their newsletter that they were still basically did out of the prison. I don't know how
it was like a fucking catalog for pedos. Yeah.
And it had like their preferences and all that, like on the cards and stuff.
Yes. And one of the sons of like what wasn't it like a GM executive was wrapped up in one of these pedophile rings. I mean, you guys, it goes so deep.
Yeah, and
they're all connected, man.
In that podcast,
that was probably the most shocking. Oh, go ahead, Nick.
And I think I may have played. We actually, when we covered Gacy, we actually did use that podcast to pull some stuff out of, and I might have actually taken samples of the cops that even said if you were to see some of the names that were in these things, it was all
you wouldn't believe it.
That's what they said. It was
right.
People's names. You'd be like, oh my God, I cannot believe this. Yeah.
Well, Gacy was supposedly involved in the United States Junior Chamber.
The JCs.
The JCs. And I found it a little interesting is they have, for me personally, they have an annual party every year called the Stag. And supposedly Gacy used those stag parties to kind of like get people in this group with the cards and everything.
Well, and then one of the JCs, like one of the higher up guys, Gacy sodomized his son, and that was the first charge he ever got. So it's like, you hear about how they do these things to blackmail politicians and shit, and it's like, what are the chances that John Wayne Gacy's in this JC's club, and then one of the fucking guy's kids gets sodomized, and it's like, oh, well, that was just totally random. We don't know how that happened. Like, how do you get a hold of this kid? And for that long a period of time, and then like, I don't know, you guys. It seems like all of this is so interconnected, and there's such a spider web, and it's actually the same with the John Bonet case, I believe, because I talked about it with Nick before a long time ago. I don't know, what was that, Nick, a year ago or something? There's these larger pedophile rings that operate, and these Wonderland raids were going down, and they found a bunch of people with pictures of John Bonet on their computer and shit. So it's like John Bonet's dad was running the Access Graphics company. The name itself, I feel like, is a dead giveaway, but Dave McGowan links John Bonet in with all this other shit in Program to Kill. I mean, you guys got to read that book if you get a chance, because like even the chapter on John Bonet is fucking wild, dude. It's wild. And he pretty much links what happened to John Bonet in with what happens with all these pedophile rings. And Dahmer is the only one I will say is probably an authentic serial killer. You guys can disagree with me. I do think he had help. I do think he was trained, but I think he's one of the only ones that I will say may have been an authentic serial killer. And I kind of wanted to wrap up with some stuff on Dahmer, unless you guys had anything else you wanted to add.
I wanted to add something real quick on the John Bonet. Supposedly there's this lodge or this, like, I guess like a cult group, and they're near where me and Mike live, and there's some rumor that her murder is tied to this weird like occult lodge, and it's kind of like it's like a Blavatsky, like New Age kind of thing. And it's where the Emerald Tablets come from, and where the Ben Carson guy that keeps talking about, he got it from this guy, and his name is like Dr. Doriel.
Ooh.
Yeah, and there's some connection with Bonet and like supposedly Aquino and this place.
Oh my God.
And Knights Templar.
Yes, Knights Templar.
How are you spelling this doctor's name?
It's Doreal.
Thank you much.
White Temple, right?
I think it's Brotherhood of the White Temple.
Interesting. Yeah, I see that. Interesting.
Yeah.
You guys got to listen to my John Bonet stuff that I did too. I did just a solo episode on it, and then I did one with Nick, obviously, but that story goes deep and there's a lot of information, and I did think that Dave McGowan did a pretty good job in Program to Kill, kind of talking about what he thought happened with John Bonet. And it's like anything else. I don't think that the mainstream narrative even comes close to giving anybody the truth about that. And she'll probably never see justice because that's just how it is. And, John Ramsey, the dad, his older daughter died weird too. So this would have been his second dead kid. And the little brother Burke is all but a basket case. And they've got his ass on Dr. Phil. And I watched the interview and it's like, is this fucking real life right now, dude? Like it's just cartoonish almost watching this guy. And he's like, have you ever read the ransom note, when they kidnapped your little sister? And he's like, ransom note, ha ha. And he's like laughing. He's laughing. I mean, it's just, you guys.
It ties into Hunter S. Thompson too, with the pedo stuff. I mean, that guy was up there. He had a golden ticket to do whatever he want. So I have family that lived up there during the same time. You kept away from him. He had a golden pass. He'd shoot guns, as much dope as you could possibly imagine, and there were stars in and out of that place. And the rumors of what he was doing up there is very dark.
Dude, have you heard that he raped his cat?
No, I didn't hear that.
Yeah.
I believe it, man.
Burke Ramsey?
Yeah.
Hunter S. Thompson.
No, I was like, what?
Annie ran for sheriff.
I was like,
what? Yeah, dude. They say that Hunter S. Thompson raped his fucking cat.
And he ran for sheriff and was very tied into politics.
It brings a whole new meaning to getting some pussy.
Here's a Hunter S. Thompson fun fact. He used to be the security guard for the Esalen Institute when it first started.
Man.
He lived on the site there and guarded the grounds.
So Colby wants to do an episode just on Hunter because he's a whole. But go ahead. Sorry.
He's interesting.
No. Go ahead. Finish.
No, that's it. Go ahead.
So some of these major characters or players that kind of were instrumental into the foundation of Esalen, some of the experimentations that went on in Stanford and so forth, they all got their start in Los Alamos. They were kids of families that were dropped there. I believe the actual school for boys or something was started by Oppenheimer. I'm not entirely certain, but they all kind of started the whole, programming or being indoctrinated there, and then they move on to Los Angeles. And then we have all of this further indoctrination where most of the kids were children of parents who were indoctrinated themselves. What I find interesting is a couple of things is, so, going back to the Kate and LaBianca murders, is that nobody ever brings up Frank Sinatra in that. Farrow, him and Mia Farrow were on the ropes bad. He wanted her to leave Rosemary's Baby, and he would show up unannounced because he knew that Roman Polanski had a thing for Mia Farrow, and he would make Mia Farrow do the sex scenes over and over and over, and especially when Frank Sinatra was on scene, he would do it even so. He served divorce papers to Mia Farrow on Rosemary's Baby, and the entire Rosemary's Baby theme or whatever is pretty much what I guess you could say is, Sharon Tate's fate, right, or so forth. One of the things that you look at Frank Sinatra, he had a huge following, and one of his major fans was Aquino, and yet nobody talks about that. And how he was absolutely obsessed with Frank Sinatra. And I
didn't know that.
Then
I didn't know that either.
We have a lot of attributing crimes to Aquino. And Frank Sinatra kind of just like dissolves out in the thing. And we had talked like with SFK, how you have these traveling bands and they can go anywhere. And however, he has ties to the mob. There were alleged alleged rumors that he was kind of a hit guy for other people. He did pay for the funeral of Sammy Davis. So he was part of these things. And we do know that most of these people belong to secret societies that have all kind of started, whether it was in Europe, but a lot of them in California. And one of the main interesting things is that if you take I-10 from Dallas to Los Angeles, you get 616 miles. And I believe that is the real number of the beast. And right smack somewhere dab in the middle is Los Alamos. And so nobody really makes those connections. And I always thought that was odd, that, it's one of those things that's kind of in the periphery. You can't really make anything of it, but it's there. And so, yeah.
Are you guys familiar with the Lookout Mountain Laboratory at all? Okay. Well, you know who had top secret clearance to that bitch was like Marilyn Monroe, Frank Sinatra, presidents. Yeah. Yes, so it's like you were saying, it is a secret club. Mm-hmm. So do you really say that motherfucker's last name Aquino? Is that how it's?
I don't know.
Is it Aquino or is it Aquino?
Actually,
it's Aquino.
I say it both ways.
Potato.
Yeah, asshole.
Yeah, I was gonna say I might have been saying it wrong this whole time. I don't know.
Yeah,
but
to quote Bill Gates, he's dead, so
there's something that ties in Aquino. I don't know. I don't know how to say it.
Yeah, no, me neither.
That ties into the whole because how he has the widow's peak going.
Mm-hmm. Mickey Mouse.
It ties into Mickey Mouse. And on Rosemary's Baby, she ends up getting drugged by being slipped a Mickey, right? And so you have wearing the Mickey Mouse as well, almost as a nod to knowing what happened with the murders.
And Sammy Davis
and
Aquino, they're both in the Church of Satan at the exact same time, basically.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I think that whole Rat Pack was dabbling in Satanism there, if you will.
Yes, and they were all members of secret societies, all of the Rat Pack. It may not have been the same secret society, but they were all members of a secret society.
For sure.
That's so fucked. And I mean, it's the sad truth, but so that's why I think we should get this same group together to go over Laurel Canyon stuff, because it's so interconnected. I mean, if you're going to talk about one, you almost have to bring up the other, because it's like the Lookout Mountain Laboratory thing. All these assholes had top secret clearance. I've done like 3 episodes on Marilyn Monroe and how she was definitely not fucking unaliving herself. And I don't know if you guys have 9-to-5 jobs or whatever where you can listen to podcasts, but if you have a chance, listen to what I put together on Marilyn, because man, it's clearly blatantly obvious just with scientific evidence alone and no conspiracy stuff that she did not commit suicide. I don't even have to take it to a conspiratorial level. I can just show you autopsy report findings and prove to you that she didn't kill herself. So I mean, it's just, but they're so good at selling you mainstream narratives. I did it on Tinfoil Hat even. I went on and talked about Marilyn Monroe because it's like, it's crazy the amount of stuff that's out there that you can find that prove that she could not have committed suicide, but nobody wants to talk about that. They'd rather make 17 documentaries about her on Netflix about how depressed she was and like, oh, she had a hard life. And she is a programmed multiple fucking monarch, you know, that she's a sex kitten like that. This is the realest shit. And I think that people just fall so easily for whatever they put out there. I don't know who Tracy Twyman is.
Look, how about Jane Mansfield?
Oh yeah, that's another one. Hey, didn't Anton LaVey have like some dedication in his satanic Bible to Jane Mansfield and Tuesday Weld, Marilyn Monroe?
Yeah,
and he put a curse on the guy, and he didn't want her. He told her to not basically ride with him in the vehicle or whatever. And basically that was the invention of the Mansfield bar, the Mansfield bar on trailers for semis.
Well, I don't want to get too far off on a tangent. I don't know how you guys feel about the conspiracy that Paul McCartney was killed, the real one, in a car accident and replaced by another dude. But they have Jane Mansfield on the Yellow Submarine album cover. And there's all this other really weird symbolism on the Yellow Submarine. Not the Yellow Submarine, was it?
Maybe you're thinking of Sergeant Pepper's, maybe?
Sergeant Pepper, yeah, where they're all standing above a grave. So one of the faces in the background is Jane Mansfield, and they do say that the real Paul was killed in a car accident, very Mansfield-esque, and, was replaced by this other guy.
The look-alike contest. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And whoever replaced Paul, I approve, because the motherfucker was talented and he wrote some great songs and he did a lot of great work, and thumbs up to that guy, whoever replaced him. But I did find that interesting that they snuck Jane Mansfield in that album cover. It could be one of those candy conspiracy theories, but I think that it was interesting they included that. But
Crowley's on that cover too.
Yeah.
Shut your mouth.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
What?
In the background.
Oh yeah, he's right.
Yeah, he's allegedly Sergeant Pepper. This thing about Sergeant Pepper teaching him how to play rock and roll 20 years ago today, that'd have been 47 versus 67.
Right. Well, and there's all that stuff about who is the walrus, and we talked about Lewis Carroll in the last episode being a huge pedo, and then John Lennon was obsessed with him, and they had all this walrus imagery, the Beatles did, and the walrus is Paul, who might be dead and replaced by a lookalike, so you never know.
Well, and then speaking of like Mansfield LaVey, isn't Jane Mansfield Mariska Hargitay's mother? The actress from Law and Order.
Oh, you're right. From Law and Order, right?
Yeah.
Is she?
Yeah. And like she's a huge Swiftie, Taylor Swift fan. And you know who Taylor Swift looks exactly like?
Zena
LaVey. Just saying.
Let's bring it all the way back to the Laurel Canyon. Isn't Anton LaVey in the cover of Hotel California as well?
Is he?
Yeah.
Allegedly.
Yeah, he's upstairs in the window. Yeah.
Yeah. So now we brought it all the way full circle back to the canyon. My favorite thing to do. But so I wanted to kind of wrap up with Dahmer, if you guys are down to talk some Dahmer really quick.
Yeah.
All right. So Dahmer, I think that he was fucked up since he was a child. I think that there could possibly be tests that they give to children in school and shit where they can pick out potential psychopaths, in my opinion, because for some reason, Jeff has like weird stuff that happened while he was even in high school. Like on his senior class trip, they went to Washington, and he makes some type of like anomalous phone call that we don't know who he called or how he got the phone number, but he was able to arrange a private tour of the White House for him and all of his classmates on his senior trip. Nobody knows who he called. Nobody knows how he was able to get that set up. But like I said, I think Jeff was an authentic serial killer. I think they had him picked out from an early age. I don't know what his connections were. He got some private trip around the White House for him and all of his friends. And then he later goes on and becomes military. And while he's in the military, this is something that I just found out that a lot of people don't talk about. There are 2 Jeffrey Dahmer victims that survived that he was in the military with in Germany. And one of them's name is Preston Davis, and the other one's name is Billy Chapman, I believe. And they both talk about getting drugged and brutally raped and tortured by Jeffrey Dahmer, but he didn't kill them. And this was all in Germany while he was in the military. And the one guy, Billy Chapman, he even got a rape kit done. And he went to go get the results of the rape kit and said, Jeffrey Dahmer raped me. And sorry, lost the results. We don't know where they are. And so these two guys have been screaming at the top of their lungs that people need to start looking at missing people in Germany from the time that Jeff was there. And that they also said Florida and somewhere else he has victims too that have never been identified, but they are Dahmer victims. And so he started real early. And it's crazy to me because not only could there be other victims when he was in Germany that we don't know about, and 2 survivors, when he gets back home, he's on a whole nother level. He's like drinking blood bags, and he's going to these bathhouses, and he's going to the gay clubs, and he's taken it to an extra fucking level. Like, whereas before he had killed one guy, it was a hitchhiker guy. He took him back to his house and he busted him upside the head with like a barbell or something and cooked him in the oven and fucking turned his bones into fucking cat litter or some shit and sprinkled him all over the place. Then he goes to the military. He comes out Jeff 2.0 and he's on some whole other scientific type shit. Like, where the fuck did you learn this, Jeff? And he was supposedly just a medic. So where did he learn all this shit, you know? He was also, he had an honorable discharge, but they said he got discharged for being an alcoholic. So I don't know if that's a thing, if you can be a raging alcoholic and still get an honorable discharge with full benefits. It seems like to me you wouldn't, but Jeff did. And it's like I said, he gets out of the military and he's Jeffrey 2.0. So are you guys familiar enough with this case to know what I'm talking about when I say that big barrel, that he had like a barrel of acid in his apartment where he would just throw bodies in and let them. All right. This is something that doesn't make sense, guys. Jeffrey never owned a car. Never owned a car. Okay. He said he went to the store. Tell me what store you can get this from. Bought a 57-gallon drum of acid, called a cab, loaded the 57-gallon drum of acid into the cab by himself, didn't spill any, didn't nothing, drove it back to his apartment, then carried it by himself up 2 flights of stairs into his apartment. But when the police came to take the barrel out of the apartment, it took 2 guys in hazmat suits with a moving dolly to get it down the 2 flights of stairs and get it out of his apartment. So you're telling me this guy with no car by himself, and the cab driver asked no questions, apparently, he got a 57-gallon drum of acid from the store. What store? I don't know. To his apartment.
Yeah, store.
The DARPA store.
Himself, he toted that bitch up 2 flights of stairs by himself. And nobody asked any questions like, Jeff, what's in the barrel? Nobody said
normal.
that. Nobody saw him in the hallway, like with a rope tied around this bitch, like pulling it up the stairs and said, Jeff, what's in the barrel? Like, are you serious? This guy had no car. Also, a couple of his victims, they lived like 2 hours away from where he lived, and somehow he was able to abduct them, and then walk them back 2 hours by car. Okay, so you can imagine what that would be walking. But somehow, with no car, he got them from another city back to his city. And like, guys, it's almost like the Ted Bundy thing. He couldn't be 2 places at once. And his dad almost has like a gay crush on him. He shows up in all the interviews with Jeff. He's always taking Jeff's side. He's always saying what a great guy Jeff is. His dad's a fucking scientist. You want to talk about where did he get a 57-gallon drum of acid? I don't know. Maybe his fucking scientist dad that works at a research lab.
Right.
Okay. How about that? How about his dad wrote a book and said that he's had dark thoughts his entire life and wanted to burn a bitch alive and like do all this other stuff. And then he's always showing up in interviews with Jeff saying like, Jeff's not a bad guy. Jeff isn't that. I think his fucking dad was helping him. I think his dad fucking brought him the 57-gallon drum of acid and him towed it up the stairs. I think his dad knew a lot more. Do you remember this story where Jeff's dad came over to his apartment or his house or something, and he said, Jeff, what's in the box? And he was like, oh, I can't open the box. There's a bunch of nudie magazines in it. I'll get those nudie magazines out and I'll show you the box tomorrow. And he's like, okay. And he just leaves. What parent do you know if your kid had a locked box under their bed and you were like, what's in the box, Jeff? And they were like, it's nudie magazines. I can't show you. Come back tomorrow after I've gotten rid of it. You'd be like, motherfucker, open this box up right now. I'm not coming back tomorrow. There is no me coming back tomorrow. Open the box. He had a fucking head in the box. He had a whole cock and ball set in the box. And they could have found out right then what he was doing. But no, his dad leaves and comes back the next day after he's had time to like get rid of this shit. Also, where did he learn all this taxidermy stuff? And like how to like melt these bones down and all that. Maybe from his dad, the chemist. I don't know. Like,
well, wasn't there a crossover with another serial killer in the army in Germany at the same time as old? As, I like how we're referring to him as Jeff, as if he's coming over later for pizza. He's just our friend Jeff. But yeah, wasn't Arthur Shawcross, I believe, was also a serial killer. Was in the army. He was in Germany at the same time. It's almost like, and I think he was also a medic as well, if I remember correctly. Dude, it almost seemed like him and old Jeff were in some sort of training together.
Dude, they were in a gay fucking lovers relationship is what they were.
Yeah.
Like, listen to me. Jeff said he got off by watching The Exorcist Part 2. And then he would go get victims. And then he wanted to take all the bones and make an altar in his apartment. Right?
Yep.
Right? Well, here's something that nobody else talks about. You know how he molested one brother, and then the other brother, he drilled holes in his skull and injected acid into his brain? That was a set of brothers. Well, there's another set of brothers too, because one of the Jeffrey Dahmer victims' brothers, after Jeff went to jail, was killed in a ritual sacrifice. That's what the article says. One of the brothers of a Dahmer victim was killed in a ritual sacrifice after Jeff had already said all this stuff about setting up altars in his apartment and shit. You might think he had help from the outside, or he was part of a group, right? Or maybe his dad helped him. I don't know.
His dad was a chemist. I looked it up.
Maybe he got that. Maybe he got that.
Oh shit!
So what you're saying is he borrowed his dad's car to do all
Dude, if he borrowed his dad's car, I bet his dad knew exactly.
And he stole his dad's notes on how to do all this stuff too.
Well, the
father really
thing
didn't
about
help
old Jeff here is he's kind of the Forrest Gump of serial killers, right?
And he was brutally honest too. He'd be like, I went to the bar and I would just pick the most attractive guy and I would take him back to my apartment and I'd cut their dick off and I would like, he would just tell you in gruesome detail the shit that he was doing.
Right. Like it was totally normal. Like he explains it like he was describing his lunch.
Yeah.
Well, he's living in an alleyway behind a pizza shop, and he reports a dead body that he just found in an alleyway down there in Miami, Florida, or Hollywood, Florida, at the same time that the Adam Walsh murder, which was pinned on Otis Toole later. But Dahmer's living in an alleyway down there at the same time, and he just happens to find a dead body. He reports to the police.
Well, and you know what? The kid that he drilled into his skull and injected acid, he was a 14-year-old kid. Listen to this shit. Tell me these guys aren't protected.
You made it to the cops,
these guys aren't fucking protected. The cops come. He's got blood dripping out of his asshole, down his legs. He's clearly upset. He's 14. These two ladies are like, there's a 14-year-old kid. Well, they didn't know. They said there's a young boy out here. He's bleeding. He's crying. He's clearly been something's happened to him. And then not only do they let him go back with Jeff, they escort him back to the apartment. Here's the thing that nobody talks about and that never shows up in the documentaries. Jeff had 2 bodies in his bedroom that had been in there just rotting. when the
Right.
police dropped this kid off. You telling me experienced police officers wouldn't have opened up the door to his apartment and not smelled that and not known what that was? Like, literally
Yeah, right.
5 feet away from the front door of the apartment, there's 2 rotting corpses in Jeff's bed. And they didn't smell
Jeff's
anything.
at it
They
again.
didn't
He's just
see
out there
anything.
bursting fools.
They just leave this kid. They just leave him. It's a bunch
Doesn't
of
make
gay
any
guys
sense,
doing
right?
gay stuff. That's what gay sex smells like. It smells like dead body. Fuck off. Like, there's no way those police officers went in that apartment and they didn't smell anything. They didn't see anything. They
I
didn't.
agree. Yeah.
Nothing. It's almost as if they ran his name and whoever came back and was like, oh, it's Jeff Dahmer. Just let it go. And they left. Because those 2 police officers, they were suspended with pay, and then they were later reinstated because it was almost as if they were just fulfilling an order.
Oh, absolutely. And that within a police beat, they wouldn't have to tell them not to. They would already know that that's a building or a suspect of some reason to avoid that building. You know what I mean? So that would be common knowledge amongst the patrol beat.
Right.
But with Dahmer's other weird connections, as far as getting some sort of top coverage, amongst this whole network, how does he know all these other members of these cult networks? Right. One of his victims apparently came from the same spot as Gacy, right? They
in Chicago
shared some common hunting ground, right?
Yes, that's exactly right. And they were both gay, right? Gacy was gay and Dahmer was gay,
right.
and they're pulling their victims from the same area. Yeah, he puts the gay in Gacy, but it's like
right.
Dahmer. Listen, guys, he definitely had help, and he was definitely connected with some shit. All right.
Oh, absolutely.
It's like some of the stuff too, you guys, like the Podestas having this golden Jeffrey Dahmer victim statue in their house. They're proud of this shit. And like, if you were gonna pick a serial killer to be proud of, it's gotta be Jeff. He was feeding people pulled pork human ass sandwiches. He was like knock on their door and be like, "You hungry?" And it would be like a victim. And he was like feeding it to people like a sicko fucko. And they tore the apartment building down, right? They put a fucking park where the apartment, like, go. It's like, if you're going to tear the apartment building down where all this stuff happened and you're going to put a park there. I was telling Colby about it, and I said, do you think like Jeff could have opened up like a portal to hell in that apartment? I mean, think of the things he was doing in there. I said
maybe the portal was already there, and that's why he lived in that apartment.
Right, but I said the Ghost Adventures should go and check out the apartment, and I was like, oh wait, they tore it down and they built a park, and he said, tell him to go sit on a swing.
Zach can go there and yell at him.
Right. I was like, I would never. Like, why would you build a park there? It's like so. I mean, Jeff was, like I said, he said he got off watching The Exorcist Part 2, and he was building altars and shit, and he was doing all this stuff. So, I mean, ass vampires.
Maybe that's how he's carrying that giant ass barrel and running at like 35 miles an hour. He's possessed by some crazy demon, though. He's like carrying barrels on his back.
like literally, you guys, I don't know where you stand on demonic possession and stuff like that. I myself am a spiritual person. I do believe in stuff like that. I think it's a very real possibility. I think that you can have a demonic possession and also, be a programmed killer. I don't think those two things have to be separate from each other. If there was a case of that, I think Jeff is definitely one of them. One of his last victims was actually a guy named Tracy Edwards, I believe. And he ran screaming from the apartment, and he said, this white guy said he's going to eat my heart out. And that's how he got busted. But what people don't know is actually, out of all the victims that Jeffrey killed, the one that got away at the end was a pedophile who was on parole for raping like a 12-year-old girl. out of all the Dahmer victims to get away,
Right.
the one at the pedophile guy at the end gets to get off scot-free. If anybody should get their ass ate, it was that motherfucker. But no.
Well, he might have
gets
liked
away. I bet he would like it, but I mean, I could go on and on about Jeff. That's why I did a whole bonus episode, me and Colby, on my Patreon of just Dahmer stuff, because I could keep going and going and going, and I still wouldn't have covered it all.
Is
So
the title
you guys-
just Jeff?
No, it's actually Dahmer, just Dahmer.
Okay, nice. Just
Dahmer party.
It's like some 90s emo band.
right.
It's a sitcom name. Just Jeff.
Just Jeff.
I'd watch that show about Dahmer, just Jeff.
Oh god.
Have you
The
guys
sitcom
watched
about Dahmer?
interviews of him? Like, he seems so sincere, and he's so brutally honest. And he'll just
Right.
sit there and tell you gory fucking details of this shit. And it just makes you wonder, like,
It's a
what
demon.
the fuck?
Yeah, that reminds me of the movie Nefarious. I don't know if you guys have seen that.
I don't know if I've seen it.
No.
I highly recommend.
did.
I think you might be only able to watch it on YouTube. I'm not sure, or in America, maybe you can. In Canada, you can only watch it on YouTube. But that's what happens when this person on death row is being interviewed. He like switches personalities, and then like the demon speaks through, and he's like so deadpan, like just straight up, very honest.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like you said, Julia, like, is demonic possession, are they separate? No, I actually think to be a programmed killer, that's exactly what that means.
I
Like-
think that they actually have to open you up to that to get you
That's-
to that level.
The traumatization is to open you up to entities that can influence your actions and thoughts. I don't think that's a basic human action.
Right. I mean,
What they're
Richard Ramirez pretty much said as much, he that he worshiped the devil and, whatever. And I do think that plays a big part to do with a lot of these serial killers. And, if we want to do a part 3, which we don't have to or anything, but I think another interesting aspect, if we're talking about how the CIA can get away with this kind of stuff, a good example would be Ruby Ridge and the siege on Waco. I mean, they can literally just murder people for no fucking reason whatsoever and just completely get away with it. So if you want an example of that, you guys need to look at Ruby Ridge and you need to look at fucking Waco, because if they want you dead, you're dead. And they don't even have to have a good reason for it.
Another little interesting tie-in I thought of is Nicholas Schreck. He
Oh,
just
yeah.
loves to interview all the serial killers, Ramirez and Manson, and he's was a part of the Church of Satan, and then a part of the Temple of Set with Aquino, and
Wasn't he married to Xena?
Yeah.
yep, and married to Zine.
Some werewolf
Yeah.
order.
Yeah, he's married to
Oh.
Xena LaVey.
Come
Warrior
full circle.
Princess.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, that's all I got for serial killers for you guys. I hope people learned a
was
lot
great.
of shit.
No, that was good. That was a lot of stuff and a lot of laughs.
That was great.
Sorry about that.
No,
I couldn't help
You
it.
guys were cracking me up.
Sorry, the chat is
I
on
couldn't
fire
even look at-
tonight.
I couldn't even look at your faces. You were over there fucking.
Yo.
I was like, something is funny.
You're
as
a
hell.
pro, Julia. You just kept going. She's like, no problem. I got this.
For the people who don't watch the video, Teresa laughed so hard that she actually had to turn off the video.
I was
Dude.
like, let me just get these giggles over with and then
Yo,
come back
I was
when I'm ready.
dying.
Like,
What was?
I'm a
what put
horrible
you-
person laughing about Dahmer. Like, what?
Teresa, what put you over the edge?
I think it's probably the chat. The chat's off the hook too. I mean, the
Yeah,
chat's really
yeah,
on
Look
fire
at the
tonight.
chat. I only saw like every other comment. I saw the ass vampires, but I
Yeah.
think I missed some other shit.
I have like an ADHD brain, so like you're talking and I'm listening, but then I'm also like reading at the same time. So it's like, I don't know.
Uh-huh.
It just, I
Hey,
just
somebody
like-
said we ain't coming out Waco. Yeah, dude, there, yeah, right there. So there's a,
It's Lisa.
show on HBO. Oh, that was Lisa. I didn't
Yeah.
even read the name. Sorry.
No worries. That's what we used to
But,
call. That's what we used to call them in Texas.
Oh,
Yeah.
Coming.
There's a show on HBO.
We ain't
If you
going out, I
guys
like it.
want to watch it, it's really good about Waco.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Julia. If you think there's enough stuff to come back for a part 3, you can just let me know. But I mean,
I think a cool part 3 might be just diving into the canyon. Actually, just starting all over with a new, like 2-parter.
Yeah. No, that'll work. Yeah, then you can bring Colby with you. That'll definitely be a party. That's gonna be fun. Nice. I really look forward to that. But thank you so much for tonight. Again, it was a great show. That was 2 hours of a lot of information. We went over so many people, really, if you think about it, even side tangents and stuff. And a ton of laughs. I highly suggest for the people with the video, if maybe you can check it out after the fact, and you'll see some of the things I posted up. Yeah, I might take the live down, so you won't get to see the whole live chat, but there's some gems I posted up like when I was able to breathe and I wasn't laughing. But real quick, Julia, let everybody know where they can find all your amazing work again, please.
Thank you. Yeah. So I have, again, the Cosmic Peach podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you want extra stuff like the Just Jeff episode, you can go to Patreon and look for Cosmic Peach podcast. You'll get all the episodes early. You'll get bonus extra stuff. And so I'm always working on, I think I mentioned this in the last episode we did together. I'm always working on mini series covering different stuff. Right now I'm working on one on the 90s, the dark stuff in the 90s. Yeah, David Lynch did die.
Yeah,
did you
very
know
sad
that,
day.
Nick?
Yeah.
I bet you cried, didn't you?
No, I was upset though. I was very upset. Yeah.
I think Colby was too, but don't get me to lying. He did tell me to tell you that, but yeah, so I got a new mini series coming out on the 90s, and I'm trying to feature some clips. If any of you guys would be willing to send me one, I'm still waiting on Nick's.
That's right. I totally forgot. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I'm just like, and Teresa too, Lisa, JJ, Thrash, Mike, all of you guys. If you want to send me just a short audio clip of it doesn't even have to be the dark stuff from the 90s, but like the most memorable things to you from the 90s. And I'm trying to feature little, podcaster friends in there just talking about stuff. I grew up in the 90s. I'm sentimental about it. So I'm trying to make it enjoyable for even somebody who doesn't have fond memories of the 90s. They'll still want to listen to it. And that's what I got going on right now.
Thank you so much.
That sounds awesome. I actually love the 90s. I do a whole series comparing grunge rock to the weird scenes inside the canyon.
Yeah.
That McGowan outlined.
With Courtney Love and Kurt and
the whole scene. I mean, Alice in Chains, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, REM.
I am going to touch on that in this series. So yeah, it's going to be one of the last ones. And I think I'm actually going to have Colby come on the last episode and talk about what you're talking about right now with the grunge. It's Laurel Canyon 2.0.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I was a big McGowan fan. I know he mentioned one day about how he thought there was comparisons, in like an interview between the Laurel Canyon scene in Seattle.
There is.
That was the scene I grew up like as a big fan of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean,
Killed
it's
Thrash.
a rabbit hole for sure. It's a rabbit hole.
Fuck grunge.
Definitely did some damage.
Thank you so much for having me, Nick. This was another killer episode, and I love working with you guys. It's always super interesting.
Hell yeah, no, that was a lot of fun, and it was a really good show. I really appreciate you bringing that to the Occult Rejects this week. And the live, obviously, loved it. You had a lot of fans in there, a lot of people saying they loved what you were doing, so... it went over really good. Thank you. It seems like everybody enjoyed it, and that's what I'm trying to do. And thank you, everybody in the chat, for making my night and keeping us constantly laughing. There was some great stuff in there and, some interesting things being edited as well. And that is the end of another Occult Rejects. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.